Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Peter Barber. I'm primarily a professional opera singer, music producer, and a bass vocalist, and lately have relaunched my podcast, Vocal Arts with Peter Barber, so absolutely check that out too. Today we're going to be checking out David Draiman's live performance of The Sound of Silence. He's the lead singer for Disturbed, of course, and this is on Conan back in 2016 when this song first came out. Absolutely legendary song. I've done a cover of it myself. Of course, I've seen their original music video a number of times. I don't remember if I've actually watched this performance before, so this will likely be a first-time viewing of this, as well as a vocal analysis primarily of what David Draiman is doing vocally. I heard I'm actually pretty sick for this performance, so we might get a kind of suboptimal version of David's voice compared to what he can do if he's healthy, but I'm very much looking forward to diving in. Guys, please do like, subscribe, comment, hit the bell, do all that good stuff. And if I am adding value to your listening experience, which is my number one goal, please do consider joining my Patreon for as little as $3 a month. It is the best way to support me as a creator, artist, educator, all that good stuff. Without further ado, let's check out Disturbed's Sound of Silence.
Please welcome Disturbed!
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
You can absolutely tell his voice is not quite where it would be at normally. There's just a little bit of like cloudiness and haziness. You can hear the congestion in the sound. You can tell that he is doing what professionals do, which is if you have a big, important performance, you don't bail, because you bail if you're really, really sick. But if you are good enough to sing, if you can phonate, if you can make a decent sound with your voice, you get out there and you do the performance. So big respect to David performing in an environment like this when he is obviously not feeling his best. That, as a professional singer, mad respect to that. Always a debate with singers in the opera world, especially because the kind of singing is so demanding. You really have to weigh, how sick am I? Can I go out there? Can I make it through this 3-hour show? And it's always a difficult decision to make. That said, let's go back and break it down.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
Hello. So this is an F sharp minor, I believe. Hello, darkness, my friend. I've come. No, he sings. He options higher than that.
Hello,
Hello. Then we get the F sharp 2.
darkness, my old friend. I've
Come. And then in F sharp minor would be G sharp 2. There.
Darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
And obviously, this is a very low part of David's range, his low chest range. He is known for his, much higher metal, rock, belting, super high chest voice, mixed voice. He's not a bass, he's not known for his low notes, but this song really does start out in the bass register. Hello, down on that F sharp 2. So really it's impressive that he can even sing down there. And in the original recording, I think he goes down to E2 just for a split second. We'll see if he makes it down there in this performance. But starting in a very breathy, intimate place, obviously giving the sound a long place to progress and to climax towards. We've got a long way to go as far as intensity in this piece.
Because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains the sound of silence.
Now they have sharp 2 again. Yeah, I mean, you can just tell he's doing like what he needs to in this particular performance to keep it beautiful, keep it honest. I think that's one of the most important things about performing is if your voice isn't there, the acting side of things becomes more important. The kind of conviction in your character becomes more important, and you really have to lean into that. Because if you abandon the character because your voice isn't feeling well, then you lose, the 2 main elements of the performance, which is the musical side of things and the character-driven side of things. So to do a performance when you're sick, you really have to lean into the character or the emotion, the honesty, whatever you want to call it, depending on, what kind of performance you're dealing with. In this situation for David, it's going to be just really chewing on the text and making it real storytelling for people. And he's, of course, doing that beautifully. He's one of the best at it. Because you can just tell his whole voice just isn't there. Like the David Draymond we're used to seeing or used to hearing, all of it's just not there. And I've got so much respect for that.
Still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone.
This really is one of, I don't know, I think my uncle sent me this right when it came out, and I immediately convinced the a cappella group I was in at the time to do an arrangement of it. I think it's just an incredibly powerful piece. Simon and Garfunkel's original is absolutely incredible in a totally different way, and personal preference maybe because I heard this one at a particular time in my life or whatever. I didn't grow up with the Simon and Garfunkel. I like this one more. It just feels it's just kind of more up my alley in terms of like the kind of music I like, and it's so powerful and the way it builds. Simon and Garfunkel's very much on the text, right? There's not a whole lot of musical changes throughout the song, whereas this one, every verse you have added instrumentation, added intensity, added kind of foundation to the piece. You also have the lead vocalist in the bass octave for the first couple verses, but then up in the tenor octave. And for David, it's the tenor rock octave with all that amazing gritty belting that he does in this piece. It's just I remember just being so incredibly moved by it the first time I heard it. And it seems like they're doing like pretty much that version live. So like the same little guitar solo I just heard, the same added instrumentation verse to verse, which is great. So I'm very interested to see how it translates to a live performance versus the, studio music video version.
Streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp, I turn my collar to the cold.
Okay, so we kind of dropped that E2. I turn my collar to the. And that is like very much in the bass range. I know he does sing it. He touches down on it in the studio recording. This is the kind of thing where maybe it's the kind of thing he can do if his voice is healthy. But for recordings like that, it's totally normal for a singer to sing at a certain time of day or under certain conditions that they wouldn't normally be singing to achieve a kind of extreme for a recorded piece of art. So for David, if the E2 is not something he normally has access to, it's totally something he could have just sung that phrase or those phrases in the morning or after a night of drinking so that those low notes are richer. That is a technique that singers use, especially when going for low notes. Bass singers do it all the time. I do it all the time. If I have something really, really low to record, I'm likely going to abuse my voice the night before so that when I wake up the next morning, the vocal folds are extremely swollen and they're thicker, and for that reason you can phonate lower. Very common technique. So I don't know. I would have to go through a lot of other live videos of David singing to tell if that's a note he normally has or if it's only in the studio. But mind you, he is like a rock tenor. I mean, a low E, to have that like accessible all the time in pure chest voice would be very surprising for a tenor voice. It's right at the bottom of this descent he's about to do.
I turn my collar to the cold.
So you can hear on the word the, to the, he kind of just drops and doesn't really phonate. He kind of just drops the word. That's where you would be hearing that low E2.
I turn my collar to the cold and damp. When my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence.
Before we go on, I'm just very interested to see how in sick voice he handles his upper range. Because lower voice, usually people can kind of get by okay singing in their lower range when they're sick. I actually lose low notes, which is kind of weird. When I get sick, I usually have fewer low notes in my chest range. Most people's low notes get better when they're sick. But the high range usually just gets completely torpedoed. So I'm very interested to see how he handles these high rocky parts.
And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more.
Okay, that sounded much better than I was expecting. Rock tenor, so clearly this is where his voice is more comfortable. He's not as comfortable singing in that bass range, so perhaps because this is more in his comfort zone, this whatever cold he's dealing with still handles it better, because he sounds actually quite freaking phenomenal right there.
Naked light I saw.
What we also get as he's now ascending in his range is more vocal fold closure, which means we're getting a more efficient sound. There's literally less air coming through the vocal folds as they're vibrating like this. And that results in a more efficient sound. It means you can sustain phrases longer because you're literally using less air to produce the sound. It also produces a more powerful sound. It produces a sound with much higher harmonics in the sound, which is great for cut or squealo, as we like to say in opera. It is what opera singers go for throughout their entire range to be able to sing over an orchestra without a microphone. That is what you do in traditional opera. So you have to have a ton of power and volume and cut to compete with that wall of sound coming from the orchestra. And what we're hearing in David's voice now is an increase in that cut, an increase in that vocal fold closure as he ascends in his chest range. And you can hear it. You can hear now there's like an edge to the voice, like a sharp edge, which you can't tell true volume if someone's microphoned and amplified, but this would be significantly louder than what we were hearing in the first two verses.
Of silence.
Here we go.
And in the naked light I saw.
Like listen how nice and efficient that sound is on light, especially. Then he kind of relaxes a little bit on the word saw and allows a little bit more breathiness, but and in the naked light I saw. Listen to light, how efficient that sounded.
And in the naked light I saw.
It's like ping.
10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking.
Yeah.
People hearing without listening. People writing songs and voices never share.
That is shockingly good. That's amazing. That's up to a tenor high A. So he goes up to a few F sharps. Speaking. Onto that tenor high A, and it sounds really, truly excellent. Really sounds good. And again, listen to that vocal fold closure. Those folds now actually, there's great vocal fold closure, but David Draymond also often, and he can control this, he can turn this off and on, introduces a little bit of grit and turbulence to the vocal folds, which gives it that kind of metal rock edge to it in the belt. It's a technique you can train, you can learn to do it sustainably for sure. If you haven't trained it, take some time to learn how to do it, because you can certainly hurt yourself if you don't know what you're doing or you try to do it too much at first. You have to kind of build it into your technique. It's not something I mess around with because of opera, but Elizabeth on the Charismatic Voice and I had a wonderful chat about it the other day. Also, she just interviewed David Draymond for her channel, which is crazy. And she was a very, very good opera singer before she kind of transitioned into YouTube. She's getting back into it, actually, which is exciting. But she was talking about how she has learned, exploring these other techniques, that you can actually learn how to do all this grit and not have it affect your operatic singing, which is amazing. So definitely check out that interview when it comes out. I think it's coming out late August, my interview with Elizabeth. So definitely check that out. But David can kind of turn off and on this grit in his voice. And we get a little bit of it in this first phrase, and then he kind of revs it up. If it's like the original, he revs it up as we go throughout the song. But still, even with that grit, there's still like major vocal fold closure and efficiency in the sound as he ascends up to that high A.
10,000 people, maybe more. People talking without speaking. People hearing without listening. People writing songs. And voices never shared.
That's so sick.
And no one dared disturb the sound of silence.
Now when he approaches that last one, that last F sharp, a little bit more breathy area, a little bit more heady for sure. The first ones were much more connected to his chest voice. This last one, he kind of floats it a little bit. And as far as the music, the instrumentation, it does sound bar for bar just like their studio version. So I think they're trying to, which is smart because it was so popular right when he's doing this live performance, sticking to kind of exactly what people know and hear and want to hear is a very smart performance practice, as opposed to like doing a totally different arrangement where people are like, is this the song? Like, I don't really recognize this, yada, yada, yada. It's great to just kind of nail it exactly how people are used to hearing it in this kind of setting when it's like a promo, essentially.
Disturb the sound of silence. Fools say that you do not know. Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words and I might teach you. Take my arms and I might reach you.
Yes.
But my words, like silent raindrops, fell,
Yes.
echoed in the wells of silence.
I can't believe how well he's nailing this while sick. It's wildly impressive. We're gonna backtrack some and talk a little bit more.
Silence like a cancer grows.
So you can tell even in this lower or like middle part of his range now, he's putting more intensity into the sound, which intensity really in this case is translating to that vocal fold closure and brightness in the sound. And what's great is that he's developing the voice with the character here. So, you know, his whole body language and facial expressions were all much more intimate in the start. And now he's kind of like this, and we're getting this with that more edgy sound. And so it's like everything is building together with the instrumentation in the background. So he's revving it up, verse to verse, revving it up.
Silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words and I might teach you.
He uses to re-articulate that second note on might. Hear my words that I might teach you. He kind of uses an H to kind of re-articulate that sound. Sorry, the camera's wobbling. Hear my words that I might teach you. That's both a technique to just make that second pitch of that elided note clearer, that connected note clearer, if you have two notes on one syllable. It's also sometimes a technique people use to just kind of transition into a different register or a higher range. That huh at the start means your voice actually stops phonating for a second, and it kind of gives you the ability to reset a little bit into that other register. So instead of hear my words that I might teach you, he goes, hear my words that I might teach you. So just an interesting thing to watch out for, and he was doing it earlier in the song as well, but I'm just flagging it now.
Hear my words that I might teach you.
My height.
Take my arms that I might reach you.
He has a little
Take
bit of
my arms that I might reach you.
choo. He has a little bit of over darkening on this ooh vowel. You can tell the tongue is pulled back a little bit into the throat. So instead of might reach you, you get ooh. You get like a little bit of a covered sound. Listen to that. If you can parse that, you're developing your ears, which is the whole point of this channel.
Take my arms that I might reach you.
Here that's just a little bit like muffled, which just means the tongue is pulling a little bit back into the throat. So we actually lose some of that cut and squeala that you hear on every note leading up to it. One more time, just for your listening's sake.
Take my arms that I might reach you, but my words like silent raindrops fell.
I want to flag something he does with a vowel here. This is called vowel modification.
Reach you.
This is how he does words. So words, how we say words, just like that. But my words. But he goes, but my words, and really opens up the vowel, which I think means that F sharp, we're getting towards the top of what an opera would consider singing open, fully open in chest voice before you kind of navigate through that secondo passaggio, which for male voice types, aside from countertenor, is just a resonance shift. That's a whole can of worms I'm not going to get into. But opening up the vowel helps you sing those higher chest notes before you go into your transition, essentially. So instead of words, you have words. So keep an eye out for that coming up.
But my
Like wide open up there on words.
reach you, but my words like silent raindrops fell.
And that is David Draymond's money zone. When he gets up into that high chest, gritty rock belting is absolutely epic. One more time.
Like silent raindrops fell, echoed in the wells of silence.
That's verse.
And the people bowed and prayed.
Yes.
To the neon god they made.
This gritty singing seems almost entirely unaffected by his sickness. It's like the really clean phonation where you hear his kind of sickness, where you hear he's kind of down with the sickness. Boo. But in his gritty stuff, it's like the sickness doesn't even really matter. Because his gritty stuff sounds extremely high quality, like very close to the recorded session.
Of silence.
So there's a couple times of grit, and Elizabeth knows more about this kind of singing than I do, for sure. So go check out her video on this song. But there's multiple different kinds of grit, and there's multiple ways you can introduce turbulence to the vocal folds. So what you're hearing in his high range on like that high A grit there it's a different style of grit and turbulence than you're hearing in this lower stuff. I believe there is some false fold activation on this grit he's using in his lower range, and you can kind of hear and feel what he's doing, and it's like a lower kind of resonation, lower kind of resonators than what you get in that upper really pingy sound. This is more of like a guttural on this, and the people bowed and prayed, and you can kind of feel like the false folds under the true folds activating. I believe that is what's happening here.
And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made. And the sign lashed out its warning.
That's such a cool example of him popping out of the grit for a very brief period of time and then going back into it. So he goes like gritty, 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 then a really clean phonated note, and then back to grit. Super interesting.
And the sign lashed out its
On out, it's just like totally clean, no grit whatsoever. Just on the word out.
and the sign lashed out its warning. And the words that it was forming.
He's occasionally a little bit under pitch on those highest notes, on those A's. I fully attribute that to whatever sickness he's dealing with. It sounds like most of his upper range is very much intact, though, especially when he's singing with this grit. But he is a little bit, just a hair pitchy occasionally on this really high stuff, which A is very normal in live performance, especially when you're dealing with in-ear mics and shit like that. And even more so if you're live performing while you're sick. It is like fully expected for singers to be a little bit, off their game in those environments. Especially when you add in something like choreography. Now, obviously, David's just sitting here, but people give live performers a lot of shit for singing poorly, like on tour, like Taylor Swift or like a Katy Perry or whatever. But when they're doing all this choreo, they're like literally dancing and singing at the same time. Like there's just, go try it yourself and record yourself. There's just no way to keep the voice perfectly in tune if you're doing a bunch of movement. Like the voice needs to have stability to execute flawlessly. It just does. So in this case, in-ear microphones, live performance, the guy's sick, a little bit out of tune, especially on the high stuff on occasion, but for the most part, very, very well in tune for the most part.
And the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, whispered in the sound of silence.
Phenomenal. I am very, very impressed with this performance. Everything he was able to accomplish despite feeling under the weather. Just a magnificent voice. I'm gonna have to go watch him when he's fully healthy singing this. I assume it sounds pretty close to the studio version, but it's really interesting that the gritty sounds were largely unaffected by the sickness. The sickness was only really clear when he was doing the much more intimate singing, especially in the beginning. You can just tell his voice is just not all there, and there's congestion and stuff. Once he gets ripping on it, it sounds pretty much what we're used to, which is just a very cool thing, very interesting observation. This is a lot of fun to listen to and analyze, to hear the vocal differences between, his studio version, which is him at his absolute optimal singing potential, versus versus this performance where it's live and he's sick and he's dealing with all these different elements. Just to hear the differences there. But very impressive performance. Thoroughly enjoyed. Hope you guys enjoyed the analysis. You can go check out my analysis of their studio version of this song. I'll link it here. Talk about the same kind of stuff, but just in the studio. I talk more about the musical arrangement and such like that. Check that out. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you learned something. If you gained appreciation for David or Disturbed or this music, please do consider joining my Patreon for as little as $3 a month. Otherwise, please do like, subscribe, leave a comment. Could be anything. David's awesome. Sound of Silence rules. Yada, yada, yada. Hit the bell for notifications. And hope you guys learned something. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.